Hi everyone. Today I wanted to give you some information on how to set up an online business or how to start your online business in Australia. Okay, we've got a few slides to get through, so let's get into it. The first thing you need to do is you need to come up with a good online business name, and this is the name that you will be trading under for your business online. So you need to do a couple of things here. You need to go and make sure that obviously what you want in terms of your name is not already taken. I would strongly suggest you choose names that are easy for people to remember, and as I say, they're not easily misspelled. I note that misspelled could also be spelled with misspelt with a T. Anyway, and I would also ensure that the domain name and the company name are both available because it just adds to consistency. So as an example, we run Ask a Contract Lawyer and The Contract Company, which are two names which are easy to spell and are memorable as they describe exactly what the service is. So we would strongly suggest that you do things like that. I use GoDaddy to check for all domain name registrations. It's a really good website to use, but obviously there's plenty out there. If you're going to run a Facebook page, you should also check that the Facebook page or any Twitter page or YouTube pages are all available in terms of using the name that you want. And when it comes to company names, you need to go and have a look at the ASIC database and just ensure that the name you want for your company name is not taken. If your company name is taken, but the domain name is available, I would still choose the domain name that you want. And it doesn't matter as much about the company name because any company with any name can own a domain name with any name. So the key thing really is to get the domain name that you want. Okay. Should you incorporate your online business? Incorporation is great because when you form a company, you create a separate legal entity, and that means that it's the company that gets sued and not you if someone were to sue you. The only downside with incorporation is it costs money. So to file a company application, there's a filing fee with ASIC that's around, I think, around $450, maybe $500. So you'll get online businesses that will file companies for you for around $550 to $600. So that of itself is not too expensive, but then don't forget every year you've got to lodge tax returns for that company, and that can be expensive. There's also a couple of filing fees you need to pay ASIC, which is the regulator for companies in Australia. There are a couple of filing fees you need to pay them each year, but they only total around $300. So it's not a big deal. I would definitely do it, especially if you are looking to start an online business which has some risk, as in risk you could be sued, or the online business is going to take money, as in receive payments from people. So if money or risk are involved, I would form a company to protect yourself. Went the wrong way there, sorry. Okay, so because you're going to work online, you obviously need a good website. The easiest thing I think to do if you're trying to get a website designed is go and find a website that you like the look of. And that's always an easy way to then go to the website designer that you've picked and say, listen, I want you to create a site that looks like this. You know, it has these 6 pages that look like this website and then another 5 pages that look like this other website or something like that. It's always easier for someone to work with, say, a template. Also, you should put some rigor into finding a good web developer. Some secret sauce here, which I suppose a few people would know about, but others wouldn't, is I would be looking to use contractors who are based in other locations. There's plenty of websites out there where you can find good people with good skills. Things like, or websites like Upwork, Freelancer, lots of websites out there like that where you can actually go and find website developers who are based overseas, probably going to be a bit cheaper than Australian ones. Sometimes it's obvious you get what you pay for in terms of if something's too cheap, you'll often get a pretty average product. I have dealt with a couple of Australian web designers over the years, and they have been very good. So that's always good. So if you really need a primo quality website, look, go with Australians. But as I say, there's plenty of other options out there where you may get more bang for your buck. Key thing here is when you get that website designed and built for you, if you're not doing it yourself, is that you want to make sure that the IP rights, as in the intellectual property rights, which will most often be copyright, you need to make sure that the intellectual property rights in that website are yours. So this is where I'd suggest you have some sort of development agreement, website development agreement, etc., where it's clear in that agreement that you own the IP that the third-party designer or developer creates for you. At common law, in other words, in the absence of a written contract, the legal position is that the third party owns the IP, but because you paid them to develop the website for you, you get a broad license to use that IP. But that's not ideal. You want to own the IP in whatever's been developed for you because you've paid for it. So you should put in place a contract that covers that off. It doesn't have to be overly long and complex in terms of the IP provision at least, but you need to put it in writing to reverse the common law position. Okay. Most often, website designers' sensitivity will not actually be to owning the IP. In other words, they won't actually care so much about owning the IP. What they care about is being paid. So most often, in a lot of website development and designer agreements we've seen, it's common that the designer owns the IP until such time as they've been paid. And once you pay them, that act of payment triggers a transfer of the IP from them to you, which sounds fair. So you've paid them because they've done good work. At that point in time, you then own the IP. Now, legal notices. When you form your online business, you need to protect yourself legally through that website, and there are many things you can do. There are terms and conditions, there's the disclaimers, and there are privacy policies. Now, privacy policies don't actually protect you in the same way as terms and conditions and disclaimers do, but we're going to step through those in a minute. And just note there that never mislead your customers in what you're selling, providing, doing, or saying in your business. So that's where the terms and conditions can really assist, because you can clearly set out in those terms and conditions what you and or your business is doing for your customers or clients. So what are website terms and conditions? The easiest way to think about these are they are the terms and conditions that create a contract between visitors or users of your website and you. So as soon as someone comes onto your website, you can make them be bound by your terms and conditions, so that if they then go and transact or do something through your website, they are covered by your terms and conditions. In other words, they're covered by the terms of your contract. And that's an important thing. And it's a good thing for you as the person running or setting up your online business, because it allows you to set the terms upon which you are willing to do business, and that way you can substantially lower your business risk. So most terms and conditions are long and painful to draft, but they generally cover things like rights and responsibilities of the customer, you as the business running the website, what the website does in terms of complying with legal requirements, because there are, say, service warranty requirements under the Australian consumer laws. But the big thing is that you as the business owner can limit your liability. So you can basically say to people who use your online business, if we cause you, Mr. Client, some loss, then the amount we will pay you is limited to the amount of X, whatever X is. So that way you can substantially lower your business risk. And you do that by putting the limitation of liability in the terms and conditions. So when do you need those terms and conditions? Well, as a simple rule, I would say you need at least a very basic set of terms and conditions for every website you have, but you definitely need them if you're selling goods or services and offering professional advice, because when you start transacting and taking payment for goods or services through your website and or offering professional advice, which could turn out to be wrong, you definitely want a contract that protects you. And that's where website terms and conditions come in. They are the terms and conditions or the contract that protects you. So why do you need to have terms and conditions? Well, as I said, the main reason is to protect or set the terms contractually upon which you are willing to transact or do business with your online visitors. But there are other things that you can do with the terms and conditions. For instance, you can inform visitors on what your website does, what it will do, what it won't do, what's included, what's not included, how you do things in terms of what are your refund or shipping policies if you are selling goods, or you can also protect yourself and minimize your risk by doing things like limiting your liability. And you can also do things like seek indemnities and so forth, where you are making and selling material to third parties through your website. Also, terms and conditions are great for meeting Australian regulatory requirements, because there are things you have to do under the consumer legislation. If you are collecting people's data, you can specify that, but most times you actually do that in the privacy policy, but you can also try and traverse it in the website terms and conditions. To the extent someone has a complaint or a dispute about the goods or services they have purchased from you, you can set out in your website terms and conditions how you will handle with those complaints. And as I mentioned, one of the big things you can do is limit your liability. So to the extent you cause a loss to a customer or visitor of your website or a client of your website, you can set out what your limitation of liability will be, which is a very important and very powerful thing to do. Okay, moving on, a website privacy policy. So a website privacy policy is a policy that basically sets out what you will do. Actually, I'll step back. It sets out what information you will collect from people. For instance, it will say, if you sign up on our website, we will collect your first name and surname, your email address, and your phone number. Now, obviously, you may collect other information, but they're usually minimums. Well, it's definitely an email address, and most often a first name as well. And then sometimes it's phone numbers and then other material. So the privacy policy basically sets out what information you're going to collect from people and then what you will do with that information. Will you sell it to third parties? Will you just use it for yourself? Will you only use it for your marketing purposes? Will you allow third parties to resell to your clients from the data you've collected? There's a whole lot of things that the website privacy policy does. We're about to cover whether you actually need one, but it's worth mentioning too that I do believe that from an SEO perspective, Google tracks whether websites have privacy policies, and I think your website will perform better in terms of SEO if it does have one on there. Now, don't take that as gospel, because I'm a lawyer, not a SEO person, but I think that's the case. So when do you need one? As I say, the first principle is any time you're collecting personal information. So if you're an e-commerce website selling goods or services, because you're going to need information from people, like their name, their email address, their phone number, maybe credit card details, maybe where you have to ship goods in terms of their address, then you definitely want all of that covered off in the privacy policy about what you're going to do with that information. So the privacy policy needs to set out what personal information you collect, how you tend to use it, and how you'll store it to keep it secure. You also do need to let people know if you're going to store any of the information offshore, which you may sit there and think, well, I'm not storing anything offshore. But if you are storing information, say, in Google Drive, well, Google has servers that are based all around the world. And so there is a fairly good chance that your information will actually be housed on servers that are not in Australia. So I think it's always best to include in a privacy policy the fact that the data will be sent offshore, because you do not know, I don't think anyway, you do not know exactly where your data will be stored, especially if you're using large companies' products like Google or Amazon, even Facebook. You don't know where they're storing their stuff. So it's always good to have that in the privacy policy. So, as this slide said, there hasn't been many cases about breach of privacy, but the Privacy Commissioner does receive a lot of complaints, and you can be forced to pay compensation. There is, I believe, one of the key issues will be that the privacy policy can set out how often you will contact people and remarket or market to them. And so that is because a party will consent to the privacy policy on your website. So sorry, let me say that again. You can compel people to agree to your privacy policy, or make it obvious to them that if you use our website, you are bound by our privacy policy. Then in the privacy policy, you can specify how you will deal with their information and how often you will market to them. That gives you defensibility if a customer or client ever says you're spamming them, because you'll be able to say, well, hang on, by using my website, you agree to my privacy policy, and my privacy policy clearly sets out that I will market to you. So that assists you. Moving on, a website disclaimer is just a brief legal notice that states the general terms and conditions that a visitor to your website must agree on in order to browse your website. They're usually very short, and they basically say that, look, we can't actually be held responsible for the accuracy of the content. We're not liable for defamation. If you copy our stuff, you're going to be liable for copyright infringement, and also we even copied someone else's. So website disclaimers are good, but they're just not as good as a fully comprehensive set of website terms and conditions. So this slide basically just says, look, at the very least, you need a website disclaimer as soon as you launch your website. And that way you're going to have some contractual protection. But as I say, it's a good stopgap measure. It's a good thing to do at first instance, but you should definitely move to a comprehensive set of website terms and conditions, especially if you're in a high risk area or taking money from clients. Actually, just before we move on, I should just mention with privacy policies that there's often a key question, do I need one? And the answer is no. Most likely you do not need one, because you only actually legally need a privacy policy in Australia if your turnover of your business is 3 million or more. So if you make 3 million or more, you have to have a privacy policy. If you turn over 3 million or less, you do not have to have one. However, there are certain, let's call them high risk businesses where you must have, if you are engaging in business in one of those high risk areas, you need to have a privacy policy. And one of those areas is the health and medical field. So if your business operates in the health or medical field and you collect information from someone that is in any way related to health issues or medical issues, you definitely need a privacy policy. So do you need one? Not in all cases. If you turn over more than 3 million, definitely. If you operate in a high risk area, such as medical or health, you will definitely have to have one. So that's why I think it's just best practice to actually have one. Okay, let's move on. We've done website disclaimers. So how do your website terms and conditions work in practice? Well, you need to make sure that they are easily found. So usually most websites have them at the bottom of the website. Where you are engaging or having your clients engage in transactions with you, you want to put them through a physical step of clicking or checking a box which confirms that they agree to be bound by the terms and conditions. That, in essence, is what's called a click wrap agreement, and the act of clicking the box formalizes the creation of the contract. Now, the courts have said in Australia that the more active steps you make a person step through to agree to those terms and conditions, then the much more likely it will be that the terms and conditions will be found to be binding on them. So a tick box is good. Even better is compelling someone to scroll to the bottom of the terms and conditions before they get the ability to tick a box. Even better is to highlight key clauses in your agreement and to have clients tick a box next to each clause as they go down the page, and then tick a box at the very end saying that they've agreed to the terms and conditions. So from those examples, you'll see that the more active steps you make a client or customer go through, the more likely your terms and conditions will be found to be binding and enforceable, which is what you want. Do you need to do that in all cases? No. Once again, it's the old risk and reward type scenario. The more money you're taking or potentially generating through your website, or if you're engaging in any high-risk practices, then you potentially want to compel people to go through those more onerous steps. Lastly, I just wanted to talk to you about possible lawsuits. There's always a chance with any business you run anywhere in any field that you can be sued, because you cannot predict what a third party is going to do. But because you can't predict what a third party is going to do, you can put in place mitigations or steps to protect what you do. And so what I mean by that is simply make sure you've got some comprehensive website terms and conditions. Make sure those terms and conditions are drafted in your favor. Make sure you compel people to proactively accept the terms and conditions. And then, even if someone sues you, you've done as much as you can possibly do to protect yourself. And that way, you've got a good chance of defending or beating any lawsuit. The other thing, which is probably goes without saying, but I should say it, is that even though you've got these terms and conditions on your website, you still have to do what you say you're going to do. So if your website sells candles, and someone comes online and buys a candle, well, you've got to sell them the candle and ship it to them. It's obvious. But assuming you live up to your side of the bargain and your customers do what they're meant to do, and you've got those website terms and conditions, you're going to go a long way to protecting yourself. So they are the key ways to set up businesses in Australia, or how to do it. Quick recap: get a domain name, get a good domain name, make sure it's recognizable, easy to spell. Ideally, the domain name and the company name match. If you don't trade under a company name, then make sure you get a good business name. You'll need to register for GST if you're going to turn over more than 75,000. So that might be something to think about. Then engage a professional to help you with your website. Find other websites that you like the look of and potentially, faithfully reproduce the look and feel of those. Make sure the IP in the website is transferred to you through a website development agreement. Make sure then you have some strong and robust website terms and conditions that protect you, and a good privacy policy. Now, if you do all of those things, you are going to go a long way in terms of minimizing any potential risk you have and protecting yourself if customers do complain and or look to sue you. Anyway, I hope you found that helpful. If you have any questions, feel free to get in touch. Thank you very much.